lands below. There used to be lands. The river's quite full now, as we can see at the moment. It takes two courses. You can notice the clear difference in vegetation between the river floodplain and then the higher up Fish River bushveld. Panoramic view up towards Alice. Once again the view of the Fish River Valley. Looking towards Grahamstown. Charles, have you looked at the view? In the foreground here we have a cycad. Here we have a cabbage tree. Right, this is one of the clues on retreat. It's about 8 o'clock in the morning. Looking down the kloof, down towards the Fish River Valley. You can see the grasses in the background. Great spot for sighting kudus. Ants are biting my legs, so I better go. Right, this is just where we've walked down from the kloof. Just looking up the Fish River Valley. And now we're walking back towards the retreat house, the homestead, along the road. In the foreground here we can just see the height of the grass and how much rain we've just had. In the last month of December we had more rain than the whole of 1991. Sorry, is it 1992? Yeah. And last year was 1993. December, there was more rain in the December than the whole of last year. This is where the citrus used to be, in these lands here. I think Rena said that there used to be about 3,000 trees. There's the jacarandas in front of the house. This is the old stable. And the fowl run used to be in the back. Now we're coming along here to Rena's oasis. You can hear all the birds. Charles, what birds have we seen along the way? And heard? Yeah. Jack Jack? What else? Good stage fright.
You saw two Cape White Eyes.
What are those birds up there in the tree?
They're weavers.
In the background there we have the Klein Hasey. Up there. And Rena. There's Rena's oasis. Oh, Rena, what are you up to? You gonna mow? Kitchen. House. There's a donkey. Used to make hot water. The good old days before we got electricity. In the background there used to be a bougainvillea which used to divide the kitchen and the lounge side of the garden, but now they've removed it. You can actually see right through, which is rather pleasant. That's the front garden. Good morning once again from the front gate to the entrance of the retreat homestead. What we will be doing is going into the garden, show you a few shots from the garden, and from then we'll move into the retreat homestead. We'll have a chat with Rena. Here we have Rena's beautiful garden. After the rains in December, usually this time of the year is very, very dry. And into the house. Right, a brief chat, what Rena will talk to us about. We'll start off with a bit of history about retreat, when it was bought, and then this will be followed by a chat about when it became a nature reserve, the Knott Game Reserve. Right, we will start off with the history of retreat. Right, Rena, would you like to tell me a little bit about this picture here, and then I'll focus in on the individual people who you're talking about.
That's Granny.
Do you want to point to them? I can see.
Granny Wallace, Sheila Parker, she was marrying Basil Wallace from Collingham in 1923 in Grahamstown. That's Mr. Parker, Eddie Parker.
Who is that? Granny's?
That's Granny Wallace's father and her mother.
Where is it? Oh, geez, she looks like quite an old battle axe, eh?
Very strict old lady. And that is Grandpa Herbert Wallace. And that's Joe Curry, he was bestman, he was a farmer from Salem. And that's Rex Parker, Granny's only brother. And this in front here is Esme Wallace. She married a Biscoe afterwards from East London. And that is a Miss Foles from Sandflats.
Oh, right.
And
lovely flowers, eh?
I like the shoes. From this marriage, 2 sons were born. Roy, the eldest, who moved on to retreat after he got married in 1950.
Right, Rena, this looks like a really old picture.
That was handed over to us by Mrs. Smales. They were the previous owners of retreat, but it was called Greenlands in those days because of the citrus trees that were just in front of the house.
Rena, perhaps you can tell me a few stories about these little photographs here. What does this top one show?
That was taken on top of the mountain at our hunting lodge. Used to attend that every winter.
And who are those people there?
The whole family would move up. That's myself, Sheila, Wendy, and Shirley.
Diane?
Diane wasn't born yet. Diane was the real Lord Lomaki.
Right, and this next picture below that?
That's Roy walking down some street in Johannesburg.
And the one below that?
We used to do a lot of horse riding at Collingham, and that was taken next to the Weber's farm at the bottom where we used to have tea.
Quite a mean leg you've got, eh?
In those days, yes.
Alright, here we have some hunting shots. Rena, perhaps you can point to the people in the photograph.
That's Roy. We used to spend a lot of our time, as I've just said, up at the hunting lodge, and he used to invite his friends there. One of them was Norman Randall. He was an engineer from Grahamstown, and he came hunting for about 20 years on retreat. That is Tom Joubert, husband of Jill Joubert, the Herald representative from Grahamstown. He often used to come and spend some time here on the farm.
And below that?
And below that is all the meat being carried to the fridge, which was a tree. And they used to hang the meat up the tree at night so the jackals wouldn't get to it.
Right.
That's Norman Randall again with his old Willie's Jeep. That's a friend of his from Port Elizabeth. And that is Everett Smith, the photographer from the Evening Post in Port Elizabeth.
Right, this photograph taken in 1926 shows the euphorbias in the foreground, the retreat homestead in the middle, and the citrus in the background. Rena, a little brief overview of what actually happened here.
That article was written by Mrs. Kathleen Smales, the previous owner of retreat. And some Americans came out and bought the rubber rights on retreat for £500, which is a vast amount of money in those days.
But nothing actually came of this.
Nothing at all, because they were too far from town and the facilities weren't available, so it was just given up in the end.
Here we have the Great Fish River and Shirley and Diane on the right hand side. Rena, when was this major flood?
That was in 1973. Everybody laughed at me and said, "Oh, you should see the Fish River high up Little did they know that I have the Fish River, the Knott and the cat here.
The
It
second
was
picture, where is that?
devastating. That is all part of the flood, what was left afterwards.
Below the causeway, huh?
Yes.
And the last one.
I lost a lot of citrus trees. All my fences went, lucerne lands.
Okay. Right, we're going to take a short interval here. Reens, what are you going to do now?
I'm going to read a cutting from a magazine. It was always my husband's favourite. In days of old, when bulls were bold and stallions were prolific, cattle dated, fated, mated. And now it's all scientific. For now a bull in Istanbul, without the usual woo, can give its mate in winkle sprint a bouncing babe or two. So if you battle with your cattle and question their dismal gaze, fret not, my dear, the reason's clear. They're lamenting the good old days.
Now we'll have a few words about Sam Knott. In this little picture here, Rena, who do we have? On the right-hand side standing is?
Llewellyn, known as Bull Knott.
On the left, seated?
Sam, his younger brother,
When was he born?
1908.
Right, Rena's going to give us a bit of history about the Sam Knott Nature Reserve. Thanks, Rena.
It would be very difficult to describe the Sam Knott Reserve. It has now amalgamated with Andres Vosloo. All the internal fences have been removed so the animals can roam freely. The Sam Knott Reserve lies in the Great Fish River Valley between Grahamstown and Fort Beaufort and extends from Comitees to Double Drift, then north to the family farm Butters Post, which has been in the family since 1836. The Cat River joins the Great Fish River on the reserve, the Andres Vosloo Reserve northeast of Grahamstown.
Right, Rena's going to mention a few of the farms that Sam used to own. Rena?
Gateshead, Undala, Richmond, Lanka, Kunapnik, Goedehoop, Cat River Mouth, Breede Drift, Butters Post, Onverwacht, Craigniganiel, Retreat, Waterford, Fairfield, Balmafad, Selborne.
Those are just a few of them.
Yes.
About how many would you say you had in total?
I should imagine when he was farming, when he was a strong farmer, 65.
Right, these are just a few newspaper articles that have appeared in the local newspapers. Nature Reserve quadruples, map of the nature reserves. Sam Knott left 16 farms for reserve, 4 million rand to be spent on conservation. Fish River Farms to become Kudu Reserve. Farms bequeathed to Kudu Reserve. And Sam Knott lives on in Nature Reserve.
I've been asked to tell you about the circumstances behind my visit to Buckingham Palace. I've committed the details on video so that I don't leave anything out.
Here we have an article, Sam shows the way.
As you are all aware, Sam Knott left the bulk of his estate to be managed as the Nature Reserve for the Conservation of Wildlife. Mr. Kent Tibbett of East London and myself were appointed as Sam's executors.
Okay.
President of World Wildlife, Prince Philip, recently launched a 25th anniversary benefactor program with the objective of obtaining 25 individual families or corporate pledges of $1 million United States dollars for conservation. Dr. Anton Rupert of the South African Nature Foundation proposed Sam's name. Well, following the recognition by World Wildlife, Mr. Tibbett and I attended. My visit to the palace.
Okay, Reen, who went with you overseas?
Rennie Froome, Sheila and Wendy.
You flew over, huh?
We did. This is the program I received. We were fetched at the hotel in a World Wildlife chauffeur-driven car. We received name tags and presentation cards.
Is this nightclub?
Is that the nightclub there?
Here at the bottom. That's still at the hotel.
Who's that guy in the middle?
Franz Struber, secretary too.
And then that was the dinner, the one below.
It was the dinner after the... This is a... We said goodbye outside the Buckingham Palace. Then I went back to my hotel, then we had the party afterwards.
Who are those two people on the left there?
Mr. and Mrs. Golding from Cape Town had presented £1 million.
Rena, maybe you can tell me about the picture you got at the Buckingham Palace.
Just see
The painting.
Come and see that this presented with a painting of pelicans by Prince Philip. The Sam Knott Nature Reserve was officially opened on the 30th of October 1992. Special guests were Dr. Anton Rupert, Dr. Johan Neertland, Mr. Elon Worcroft, Peter Bedeck from Graaff-Reinet, who influenced Sam to a great extent.
Right, this is the main plan of the entrance gates to the Bush's post section of the game reserve.
The following animals were reintroduced into the game reserve over the last few years: Enont, red hartebeest, python, buffalo, blue darker, oxpecker, warthog, and menace. And two major highlights were the introduction of rhinos and hippos. Fresh rhino was carried out without any hassles.
9 hippos were freed in the Fish River in May 1990.
Mr. Knott had a love of wildlife, and particularly the magnificent kudu, so much so that when kudu had almost been exterminated in the Eastern Cape by hunting in the 1920s, this species was restored from a population surviving on his farms. In the words of William Penn, I expect to pass through life but once. If there be any kindness I can show, let me do it now, as I shall not pass this way again. Sam Knott exemplified this phrase, a South African whose family arrived with 1820 settlers. Sam's heart was in the Eastern Cape, where he was a prominent cattle farmer.
Right, but more informal after the interview where we were all getting very hot and sweaty. We now have the Great Fish River. And here we have Rena pumping the little boat. Charles and Di are going to go down in the Moya's inflatable little rubber duck, Feather. Rena hard at work.
Okay.
Reens, we're nearly finished. Charles doing the job. And the river in the background, this is a little pump for pumping water up to the house and to the compound. This is the view of the walk that we went on this morning up the kloof and the road. Notice the lovely grass in the foreground. Pipeline that goes up to the house, it supplies the house with water. The house is in the background below this huge big hill. Charles, how's the paddling going? You coming to fetch me?
So we have Rena and Di at the causeway. And the causeway itself. The road on the other side leading off to double drift. How was the paddle, Rena? Good.
This is the hide, and this was the gewesen. It's 7:05. We can see it's quite early in the morning if the sun's quite high. Hear all the beetles and birds in the background. Manzi Hide, great place for sundowners. We call champagne breakfast. Yeah,
Yes. There we have an eland bull and an Andries Vossler.
This is the road going down to Retreat and the Fish River Valley in the distance. Boundary fence going somewhere down the mountain there. And this is Buckland's, Tony and Lynn Phillips' farm. You can see the homestead in the distance there. Right, this is Spring Camp on Retreat. This is a great spot for spotting kudos. Along this little runt on top there. Very common vegetation of the Fish River is the euphorbia, which we see up there. An overview shot. Full drift runs all the way down. He's actually got water in at the moment, and that's the road to Retreat once again. And the Retreat homestead in the background. Private road, no entrance. And my goodness, if you do go down there, you'll meet a lady with her shotgun. This is the dam where all Rena's kids learnt how to swim. Also to catch fish, go bird hunting. We come into Rena's garden again. It's under the pepper tree. This is a photo of Angus, our wonderful black Labrador, who's a friend of mine for about 14 years. This was a certificate that Angus won down at Port Alfred for coming first in the large dog class. And the garden looking very overgrown, the river in the background there. And once again the house. Rena's beautiful bougainvillea. Rena claims to have had about 13 different colours of bougainvillea at one stage. This is the swimming pool part of the garden. The swimming pool has been turned into an indigenous fish pond. The washing line. This is where Rena used to make all her biltong. This little hook here. And then there we go right through to the kitchen again. Some lovely bird life, bird sounds in the background. And up there in the distance is the fish room. Get closer to the rhinos, which were in the distance somewhere. So not much commenting will be done as we get closer. You can see them in the distance. Wilson, ingati mama ne George. Zimbi.
Rena.
Oktober. Ja, phambi Oktober.